This is the inspirational life of icon Tony Bennett. Tony was born Anthony Benedetto on August 3, 1926, to an Italian father and a first-generation Italian-American mother in New York City. Tony's childhood was hard. His father was unable to work, and he and his two siblings grew up in poverty. However, his father instilled in him a love for the arts and literature before he passed away when Tony was 10. Tony grew up listening to artists such as Bing Crosby and Louis Armstrong, and had an uncle who performed in vaudeville, which gave him his first peek into showbiz. By the age of 10, Tony was singing and performing at the opening of the Triborough Bridge, and even got a pat on the head from Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. At 13, he began to perform as a singing waiter at Italian restaurants around Queens. He also had a passion for drawing and was well known around his school as an artist. Tony attended high school at New York School of Industrial Art, studying painting and music before having to drop out at age 16 to help support his family. He knew he wanted to be a professional singer, but worked several jobs in addition to being a singing waiter in order to make ends meet. He also played amateur nights around New York City and had a singing engagement at a nightclub in New Jersey. At the age of 18 in November 1944, Tony was drafted into the U.S. Army towards the end of World War II. In March 1945, he was on the front line in Europe, which he described as, quote, a front row seat in hell. He was discharged from the Army in 1946, and the experience made him a lifelong pacifist. In his autobiography, he wrote that he, quote, saw things no human being should ever have to see. After returning home, he studied at the American Theater Wing on the GI Bill. There, he developed the ability to imitate the style and phrasing of other musicians, which helped him to improvise as he interpreted a song. During this time, he made a few records under the stage name Joe Barry, but they didn't sell well. In 1949, he was discovered by singer and actress Pearl Bailey, who asked Tony to open for her in Greenwich Village. She had invited comedian Bob Hope to the show, who was wowed by Tony. Bob invited Tony to tour with him and shortened his name to Tony Bennett. The next year, in 1950, Tony was signed to major label Columbia Records. His first big hit was Because of You, which reached number 1 on the pop charts in 1951 and stayed there for 10 weeks, selling over 1 million copies. One of Tony's next big hits, Blue Velvet, attracted teenage fans to his shows. At the time, Tony was doing 7 shows a day at the Paramount Theater and other venues starting at 10:30 a.m. He enjoyed several more big hits before the rock and roll era hit in the mid-1950s. However, Tony was able to pivot and continue his success. In 1956, he hosted his own variety show for 1 month as a replacement for the Perry Como show. The show did well, and he filled in for Perry again in 1959. In the late 1950s, Tony began to focus on transitioning his musical style to more of a jazz sound. His 1957 album, The Beat of My Heart, featured well-known jazz musicians and was very popular and critically acclaimed. He followed this up with the album Basie Swings, Bennett Sings in 1958 and In Person in 1959. Both were very popular as well. During this time, Tony had built up a reputation as a popular nightclub act, and in 1962 performed at a heavily promoted concert at Carnegie Hall. The concert was a smash success and further cemented him as a star. The same year, he sang on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Also in 1962, Tony released his rendition of I Left My Heart in San Francisco. The song was 10 years old and little known, but it was a big success. It became Tony's signature song, and he won a few Grammy Awards that year as well. Following Beatlemania, Tony's career started to decline. His sound just wasn't as popular anymore. His record label suggested that he try to record some rock songs, and he released the album Tony Sings the Great Hits of Today in 1970. It featured covers of the Beatles songs and other popular songs of the time. Tony regarded that record as a career low and left Columbia for a record label in London. He tried to break into acting with little success and also became very involved in the civil rights movement at this time. After leaving Columbia, he did not find that much success in England and was soon left without a recording contract. So Tony started his own record label, Improv, and recorded many well-regarded songs and albums. However, the label did not have a distribution agreement with a major label and went out of business in 1977. By 1979, Tony did not have a manager, a recording contract, and was not booking many shows. He had a bad drug addiction, and the IRS was trying to seize his home in LA. In 1979, Tony almost died from a cocaine overdose and called his sons for much-needed help. His son Danny became his manager and moved Tony back to New York. He got his finances under control and booked him for shows at colleges and small theaters. In 1986, Tony re-signed with Columbia Records and released The Art of Excellence, which was his first album on the charts since 1972. He also received an Oscar nomination for his song Life in a Looking Glass from the movie That's Life the same year. During this time, Danny was really turning his father's career around. Regular bookings on Late Night with David Letterman, as well as appearances on Sesame Street, The Simpsons, and MTV gained Tony a younger audience. In the early 1990s, he won his first Grammys since 1962. In 1994, he appeared on MTV's Unplugged, where he famously said, "I've been unplugged my whole career." His MTV Unplugged Tony Bennett album went platinum and won him a few more Grammys. After his comeback, Tony thrived. He was playing 100 shows a year and keeping very busy. He also earned the nickname Tony Benefit for the large amounts of time that he donated to charitable causes. In 2011, he recorded a duet with Amy Winehouse, which ended up being her last recording before her untimely death. It charted on the Billboard Hot 100, making Tony the oldest living artist to appear on the chart. In 2014, he recorded a concert special with Lady Gaga and co-headlined a tour with her. In 2021, Tony retired from concerts and released his final album, Love for Sale with Lady Gaga. Tony passed away on July 21st, 2023 in New York City at the age of 96. Even with all of his setbacks, he made countless great achievements, cementing him as a cultural icon. This was just a brief overview of his amazing life.